Welcome to everyone. I told you we will be having more, fan guests, and tonight we have a guy who is like in the betting for a very, very long period of time, like in the 80s, 90s. How many eras of betting did you follow then? Like you said, you bet in Vegas in 80s. You were a bookie. How did it start? I would like to hear your life story about the odds, about the sports.
Well, it was kind of thrust upon me. I didn't have much of a choice. I was boxing when I was 6 years old, had my first fight. My first bet was when I was 10 years old. Um, yeah, I was watching Cassius Clay and Sonny Liston for the heavyweight championship of the world. I didn't know at the time that Sonny Liston was an 8-1 favorite. So my father hated Cassius Clay, so I put a quarter. I had 25 cents that I bet on Cassius Clay. He knocked him out, and so I won a quarter. And I'm running around like Cassius Clay, throwing my arms up. I'm the greatest. I'm the greatest. And my father hated him, so it was pretty cool. So I was hooked after that. So.
What did your father say when you had that quarter after everything happened? How was he feeling? You said he hated Clay, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he thought he was arrogant. He didn't like him, you know. So that's okay. I mean, everybody has differences of opinion. I recognize greatness at an early age. That's all.
Well, definitely yes. Unfortunately, we didn't have MMA back then, but I need to say my dad is also a huge fan of boxing, and he has never been a big fan of Clay, especially because he was always saying that Clay was talking too much. And my daddy was more of a fan of like guys like Foreman, don't talk too much, let's bring it on.
Yeah, it really held him back having an open mouth. I mean, he was only the most popular person in the world. Everybody knew him.
Yeah, that's true. Everybody knew him. And even back in 74, I believe he had that title fight in Africa, right? It was under the open sky, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. And you're in this business to try to get people. You want to get noticed, and people have a short attention span. It's even shorter now. I mean, people can't concentrate for 5 seconds at a time, and then they're looking on to something else. So, I mean, you look at the news, it's structured that way. They'll say, there was a bombing in Ukraine and 10 people were killed, and now the weather. And in sports, I mean, it just runs like that, and people they get flooded with so much information that they zone out and they don't pay attention, and they just focus on the things that get their attention at the time. So I'm Dangerous Dan, you're Vlad the Impaler, the Bulgarian cowboy, so yeah, you got to get noticed somehow. I mean, it's 8 billion people on the planet, but and over 1 billion people have the internet, so we're out there and we're trying to attract customers.
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to get noticed is to be different, but the best way if you want crowd to notice you is to be entertaining. I mean, entertainment is everything today, nowadays.
Well, but you have to back it up. There has to be some meat on the bone. You got to pick winners. I mean, and if you're any good, you're going to be tracked. That's why when I got back in the game a couple years ago, um, I decided to be tracked. I post all my picks on Tapologies, so they're there for everybody, all the good, the bad, and the ugly. But it's close to 66% over 2 years, and picking every fight. So almost a couple thousand fights that I've picked in those 2 years. So I wanted to study. I wanted to get back in the game. I got an offer from Wayne Allen Root, Vegas Winners, and I said, sure, why not?
Well, I'm always between 65 and 68%. Never down, never up. Literally
Right.
can't go up.
Yeah, and it's hard to increase that percentage when you're picking so many fights. So I'm in that range. And but I picked several underdogs a card. Like this card coming up, I have a couple dog picks. So I actually made 3 plays so far. I've done a little research. So I'm on 2 dogs.
Actually, for the previous card, I had 5 dogs, which is not normal for me. For me, it's normal 3 or 4. And the card before that, I only picked one underdog. And People are asking me, Vlad, what is happening with you? Why don't you pick underdogs? I said, but I don't have arguments to back it up. I didn't have arguments to back it up.
Right. Well, you can't, if all you do is pick favorites, you're going to get juiced. I mean, favorites win maybe 2/3 of the time, and there's always a few underdogs that come in, and that's where you get your return on investment, your ROI, is when you have dog plays. So there's a couple guys I follow that are they pick dogs. Their winning percentage is not that good, but when you look at their return on investment, they're winning, and they're winning pretty good because they're risking less. I mean, if you're picking a 2-1 favorite, you got to be right over 67% of the time just to break even 66% of the time. And to win, you got to be right 75-80% of the time. That's not easy.
Yeah, that's very hard. For the previous card, for example, I picked a Cremono, but I only picked a Cremono because I knew he had better wrestling than Lawrence. That was one and only reason. And I was like, okay, plus 115, but to me it was even fight. I said this is 50-50. Okay, I'm picking a Cremono. Let's see. I bet on a Cremono, and I knew I had an interview with him, etc. But the problem in this sport, everything is changing. If you're trapped, in time, that's a problem. Especially like my coach was saying, Vlad, the only thing that mustn't happen with you, you mustn't get trapped in time, because if you do something that was popular 10 years ago, it doesn't have to mean it will be popular nowadays.
Yeah. Well, back to betting. One of the things that got me noticed in 1981, January of 81, I moved to Las Vegas, and I moved there I wanted to be around the action. I wanted to see the fights. In 1978, I had gone to Vegas for the first time with a friend, and I snuck into Caesar's Palace, and I watched the Ken Norton and who was it? Who the hell did they fight? Was it Larry Holmes and Ken Norton? And and it was a 15-round fight, and yeah, yeah, yeah. And they had 15-round championship fight back then. So, they went longer even back in the early days. So, until somebody won or lost, so, but now, interesting story. I was telling somebody in 1985, I met Tex Cobb. I don't know if you know who Tex Cobb is, but he fought for the title. He fought Larry Holmes. It was the last 15-round championship fight. And the reason for that is Tex Cobb got beat from pillar to post, but he was so tough he lasted all 15 rounds. He was a bloody mess. Larry Holmes won the decision, and Howard Cosell was a famous announcer at the time. And Howard Cosell says, "I will never announce another boxing match again after this." And they went from 15 to 12 rounds right after that fight. So they said, 12 rounds is enough to take a beating, not 15. So, but Tex Cobb changed, and I met Tex Cobb. It was funny, in 85, I was working at Santa Anita Race and Sportsbook. It was one of the last independent bookmaking joints in Vegas on the Strip. And I stepped outside, and I saw Tex Cobb. Hey, Tex. And he come up to me, and he shook my hand, and he was so happy that I recognized him. And so we started talking about the fights, and he was training for a fight with Michael Dokes at the Riviera Casino, which was right catty corner to Santa Anita. It's no longer in existence. The Wynn Casino is there now, but they knock everything down and build new stuff there. But he fought Michael Dokes. He lost that fight by decision, but Tex Cobb was so tough. He was also in, I don't know Chuck Norris, but he was in some of Chuck Norris's shows, Walker, Texas Ranger, being the bad guy, so.
I was watching the show, yes. Yes, I was watching.
He was the nicest guy you'd want to meet. He was so easygoing and down to earth, and it was really a joy talking with him. I was in 81. I got there in Vegas, and I started betting fights, and I went to see all the fights. I got them for free. Just found a way in, and then I started making. I studied everything. You're kind of like, you remind me of me back in the day, only with boxing. I knew everybody. I knew all the fighters. I knew when their grandma's birthday was. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I knew everything about them. And so when I saw an underdog that was ripe, I'd see like 3-1 underdogs. I said, this guy shouldn't be that big of a dog. I bet him. I cashed the ticket, and I started cashing these 3-1. And, you get noticed in the books. When Santa Anita was an independent. It wasn't that big, but, big action. You could bet big there. And so I'm betting pretty good sized bets, and I'm cashing 3-1 underdogs. Long story short, I'm sitting in there. I'm watching it was 1983. It was the Knicks. It was the Knicks in New Jersey, I think. It was a playoff game in 83. And I'm sitting at the bar and just enjoying myself after work because I was a bartender down the street where the Mirage is. It used to be the Castaways, and I used to work as a bartender at the Castaways. I walked down to Santa Anita after work, have a beer, watch the games. This guy goes up to the counter, like 70 years old, orders a cup of coffee, and then falls back on the back of his head and drops dead. So about, 8, 10 people surround the guy, and they check him out. Oh, he's dead. So I got my attention because I had CPR training. So because I worked in hospitals prior to going to Vegas. And so I looked at him, I checked this, he was dead. And so I started CPR on him. And well, the security guard came around. I ordered him to get the oxygen. I ordered him to call 911, the paramedics. So they were on the way, and they responded very quickly. But I brought the guy back to life and through CPR. And it's weird when somebody's dead, and then all of a sudden they come back to life. It's kind of like they cough. It's kind of like their first, yeah. And so, he did that, and he was pissed off. He said, "What the hell are you doing with me?" He didn't know he was dead. So he came up to me a few months later and thanked me because I didn't make it it wasn't a big deal to me. It was just like, that's what you do. And so the owner was impressed, and the general manager was impressed. The gentleman, he says, "You ever want a job, let me know. You've got it." So I didn't take him up at the time, but about a year later I did. And so I started working, and they had me managing their boxing lines and managing the baseball totals. So I've been involved. I started getting involved in baseball too. So totals was my game, and I was really good at it. And I was the first guy to set the line for Hagler Hearns. I told you that. Made Hagler minus 160, Hearns plus 120. And
my favorite boxer, Hagler.
Everybody loaded up the truck and bet Hearns, and they flipped the odds. It was Hearns minus 140, Hagler even. And the house is getting worried. I says, "Don't worry." I said, "Hagler's going to kill him." And so I said, "Can I step around the counter and bet?" He goes, yeah, because they needed the action. So I bet $500 even money in Hagler. Then I walked across the street to Caesar's Palace, snuck in, watched the fight. It was outdoors in the bleachers, sat there, 8 minutes of war, and Hagler killed him in 8 minutes. And I'm just going, yes. What a great night that was. But it put me on the map. And, then I had people flying in from Texas, they want to know who I liked on fights. My name started, that's, I got the handle Dangerous Dan because I put my money where my mouth was. I wasn't afraid to, bet it. And so if I had a strong opinion, I backed it up, and so, so that's how I got started. Unfortunately, it was a hell of an experience. December 19th, 1985, I'm managing the phones. We have phone accounts. So, people will call in and want the line, big bettors. And so, they'll call in and they'll place a bet, and you'll write the ticket and change the odds if you have to. So I got two phones here. I'm at the cashiers. I'm looking at the line. All of a sudden, federal marshals come in with guns blazing, pointing their guns at me, yeah. And I'm saying to myself, crap, I can't, if I had enough time, I would have grabbed all the money in the cashier's drawer. I mean, but they were so fast. They just pounced on us. They shut it down. And the bad part about it, it was a week before Christmas, and we got tipped by the big bettors on Christmas. We got big tips. they show their appreciation for us, handling the phones and, our professionalism and all that. And so we lost out on the tips. The shop was closed because the owner was gambling with outlaws, people who were betting illegally. So he was, and he was doing across state line too. He was an idiot. So they shut him down, and that was the end of basically the Dangerous Dan era at Santa Anita. And it was never the same because then, I didn't want to go into the casino and work in the casino because the casinos took over the sport book action after that. And I wasn't really interested. So then I said, the hell with this. I'll go back to my field. I had a master's degree at the time, and then I went on to work on my doctorate in psychology. So I decided to go back into the psychology business, and that's when, I went from a worker to a director of treatment in mental hospitals out in California. So I worked my way up the ranks to go about as high as I possibly could. And, but I was bored. I liked the challenge of working with patients. I didn't like working with the staff. So it was always, the staff were assholes. A lot of them. They were mean. They didn't have compassion for people who had mental illness. And they always hide it, and you find out later, and then you just get rid of them, when you find out. But a lot of them thought it was like, okay, we get to practice WrestleMania today. Who are we going to take down? Who are we going to put in restraints today? So that attitude with some of the staff. And and after that, I just got burned out. I got tired of helping people and not making that much money. I mean, for all the work and all the hard work I did, it wasn't that big of a pay. So now I'm just, I play guitar and I'm a sports bettor.
Wow.
I bet MMA, and now I'm betting baseball totals. I got a game going right now, under 9.5, and it's the third inning, no score. So we'll see what happens.
That's awesome. What can you tell us? How did you get into the MMA? What was the first fight that triggered you to get into the MMA? I'll be honest, I was hooked when one of my friends brought UFC 1 on videotape. There were VHS back then, I believe. How did you get hooked into MMA?
I watched that live, so
Live?
I've watched all the UFCs, yeah. So before, I would say when I was 17, that's when I started, because I was, I was boxing, and I patterned my style after Muhammad Ali, stick and move, hit you so many times with my left, you'll be begging for my right, so, but I loved his style, love how he fought. He was very defensive oriented. He knew how to parry blows, and he was a counterpuncher. And that appealed to me, and that style appealed to me. And then after some certain life experiences convinced me that I needed to learn how to defend myself better against multiple attackers, I started studying Bruce Lee's fighting techniques, and I bought his book, and I started practicing him, and then I ran into some judo guys, and I ran into a SEAL, became friends with a SEAL, a Navy SEAL. He showed me some street fighting techniques on how to disable people very quickly, in a matter of moments. And so I started incorporating that all into my game. And so basically I saw myself as a street fighter. I wasn't really much of a fighter. I was just, if I had a fight in the street, then I was ready. So by the time I was 21, I was pretty bad, I mean, not a bad person, but, just a badass. I thought I could beat anybody. I remember this one guy. I'm 6'1". At the time, I was like 170. And I had this friend who was a bouncer. He was like 6'4", 250. And we were buddies. He goes, "You're the only guy that I know who he acts like he's 6'4", 250, but look at you." He says, "Well, you want some? Come get some. If you don't like me, bite me." So, but yeah, and then what changed things for me in terms of, when I was in college, I was a runner. And so, and it really relieved a lot of stress for me. I mean, I was really calm after running. Even it took me several miles. I used to run, when I met John Brown, Mr. Universe, I was running 10 miles a day, 70 miles a week, and some days I do 13-mile runs just for fun, and there were hills. I mean, I'd run up steep inclines and then cruise the foothills, and so I was in really good cardiovascular shape. I was 6'1", 170 pounds. I met John. I think I told you, I got a job managing the weight room at Cal State University of Fullerton. It's called Cal State Disneyland because it's 6 miles north of Disneyland in California. So, but they had a really good sports program. It was a pretty big campus. There was 28,000 students at the time that I was going there, so it's pretty good size. And I ran into John, and I tried to talk to him. And he's this huge black guy, 6'1", 220 at the time, 225. And I said something, and he looked at me, and he gives me this glare. He goes, "I hate white people." And I looked at him, I gave him the old Danimal bobblehead. I said, "So do I." And he was like totally shocked, but it was a cool icebreaker because he let down his guard and he says, maybe this guy's okay. And so, finally he allowed me to train with him, and he tried to get rid of me. He tried to destroy me in training. And it was kind of like, man, if he had known what I've been through in life, what he put me through was nothing. And I just said, bring it, just bring it, And so he respected me, and I trained. And by the time, after a few years, I was 6'1", 200. I had a 29-inch waist and less than 5% body fat. That's what arrived in Vegas when I left California. I went to Vegas, and that's who I was. I was brick shithouse, tough guy. And I met Marvin Camel at the Castaways. And Marvin Camel was the current cruiserweight champion of the world at the time, boxing champion. And his manager offered me money to fight him, because they knew I was a fighter. And it was funny, the guy across the street was the former European heavyweight boxing champion, black guy. He goes, yeah, do it. You can be the great white hope. They already got one, Jerry Cooney. So my girlfriend at the time said, you fight him, I'm kicking you out. And since I didn't have a job at the time, I decided not to fight him. And then 3 weeks later, the Castaways hired me as a bartender. But then after I was there a couple of years, then I went down to Santa Anita and I started working there as a bookie. So, I just fell in love with the action, fell in love with the fights. And it's nice to be right. I was really good at picking winners, And that's why Wayne Allen Root, he says, you can pick winners, right? I go, that's right. That's why they call me Dangerous Dan. So he hired me on the spot, And it was funny. I hadn't seen him. I saw him on commercials in the 80s in Vegas. When I was working the sport book, we'd have the TV on, and Wayne Allen Root would come on during the commercial break during, intermission, and he'd be selling his football packages, So Wayne was a hustler back then. And my friend and I used to kind of, chuckle and, just another guy trying to sell his picks, and, if you want winners, come to me. So, but I'm watching TV. I'm hanging out with this concert pianist. It was in January 2020. I'll never forget it because we had just finished doing a jam session. We went up to watch the news, and I was watching Newsmax, and Wayne Allen Root shows up. And he's a political commentator. I didn't know that. I was like 30-something years later, I see him on TV. And I said to my friend, I know that guy. And so, and Wayne was saying, he's, he says, here's my email. If you want to email me. I respond to my email. So I emailed him. And I said, do you remember the legend of Dangerous Dan in Vegas in the 80s? And so he got interested, and I told him I used to set the boxing line in Vegas. And he offered, you want a job with Vegas Winners? And you'd be my lead MMA UFC handicapper. I said, sure, why not? So here I am, grinding it out. It's a grind. My best bet, I had a really big weekend. It was like my best weekend this year. And I limited my bets. I only had 4 bets. But I won all 4 of them. and it was the Onama inside the distance. I caught the middle. I bet under 2.5, and then one guy I really respect thought it might go over 1.5, so I bet the over 1.5. It landed in the middle, so I get both bets, because he got him late in the second round with the submission, and then I had Fiziev big, and then I had under 4.5 plus money, and they both hit, so it was huge. It was great, When Fiziev hit him with that left, I go, yeah. I went, oh. And then when he hit him with the right and his head bounced off, I came, let's go, yeah. And then the ref stepped in and it was over. And I go, ka-ching, cash that ticket. That was big. That was, and I was touting it a lot. I was putting it out there. And, a lot of people saying, well, oh, Dos Anjos, he's going to grind them and get a decision win and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, one of the things that you have to take into consideration handicap, statistics matter. And that's one of the things that when I was in college, I got a master's of science, and the science was in statistics. It was analysis of variance, advanced statistics, and I got the highest grade in the institution's history. And so I was really a whiz. It was easy for me. I got a rocket scientist. Half of my brain is from a rocket scientist. So, I have an analytic mind, and I can figure. I like data. The more data I have, and I pour through it, I can come to better conclusions. That's why I'm better at you're better. These minor league guys really well. It's really impressive to me. And it kind of reminds me of like what I was in the boxing days, because I used to follow all the younger up-and-comer guys. And that's what you're doing in MMA. And right now, I just focus on the big show. And so, everybody has to have a specialty, and so my specialty is UFC and also baseball totals. I was a winner in baseball when I was playing in Vegas. So I decided, there's a lot of baseball action. There's a lot of data out there now. The season's like halfway through. I started looking at data and started making some plays this weekend. And I'm doing pretty good, so I'm going to keep it up. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
That's outstanding, man. I'll be honest, I know nothing about baseball betting, but when it comes to MMA, yeah, every single promotion matters. That's like me. For me, MMA is life, man.
Apple, they used to say Chevy, apple pie, and baseball. Those are like the American way. I've been to more baseball games than I have any other sport. So, I've been to a lot of Red Sox games back in the day, back in the 70s and early 80s. Used to sit out in the bleachers, $1 a seat, $1. Can you imagine? And then my bookie, he used to get half price bleacher tickets, so we get in for 50 cents. And my bookie, he was a big guy, and he'd wear this trench coat, and then he'd put a couple six-packs underneath, And then my uncle, he would do the same thing. We walk in, we have a case of beer up in the bleachers, get in for 50 cents. And I got my bookie right next to me. I can bet on the game. It was pretty cool. It was a lot of fun. But so baseball's in my blood. Ever since I was a kid, I've always followed baseball. So.
Can you tell more about baseball? As I'm pretty much curious, is it harder to bet on baseball or it's MMA? Because for me, baseball really is a rocket science because I don't follow it, When it comes to NFL, I do follow something. NHL, I do follow, but I don't follow baseball. So to me, that really is like a rocket science. How does it look like to bet on baseball? Which are the best moments you see?
Let me tell you something. You have to know the statistics. You have to read the data. And you get a lot of it because they're playing almost every day. They play 162 games a year. So they're in they've played 80 plus games so far. So they're halfway through the season. So you get a lot of data and you know who's good and who's bad. And you analyze the line and then you kind of figure out the implied odds, and figure out, is this a good bet or a bad bet? And so I'll have lanes. And then if the number is favorable, I'll play it. And that's like for instance, the other day, Baltimore had won 6 in a row at the time, and they were underdog at home. So I took plus 110 for a couple units on Baltimore to win, and they won the game. 7 in a row. Then so people are betting against him to lose. That's the wrong. You ride the streak to the end. You know, so they've won 8 in a row now. You know, people are betting against them and they're winning. Same thing happened with Seattle. They've won like 9 in a row. You know, and I had a bet on them the other night too. You know, at plus money. You know, they're trying to fade the streak, and you don't do that in baseball. And you know, if a team's in a batting slump, you don't bet they're going to break out of it. You're going to bet they're going to continue. That's the wise thing to do until they show you evidence otherwise. You know, so there's advantages in looking at the long-term data, but also the current data, the most recent data, and then, you know, coming up with an informed decision about the outcome of the game. So, and then put your money where your mouth is.
Sounds a bit different than in MMA. In MMA, it's an individual sport, you know. Maybe today you're not in a great mood, but in baseball, you have a team. You can change your players, and it makes sense perfectly.
Well, that's, you know, when I did a podcast interview with Wayne Root a couple of years ago, and he had asked me, you know, do you fade the public? Like, because he makes his picks in football based on fading the public. You know, he wants to side with the bookie, you know, because the bookies win in football, you know, and it's a juice game. And so, and I says, no, not necessarily. Not in MMA. It's not that way. I mean, you know, because you don't have a point spread. You know, it's you got a winner or a loser. And that's what I like about baseball, too, is you got a winner or a loser. You know, you don't have a point spread. You have a money line. You know, somebody might be favored, you know, might be a pick 'em. So, you know, there's no ties. You know, there's, you know, they go until somebody wins the game. If it goes extra innings, it goes extra innings. But there's going to be a winner and a loser at the end of the day without the point spread. You just have to worry about the money line. And the same thing with MMA. You know, there's no point spread. You got a winner and a loser. And that's what I like about it. So sometimes, like for instance, the last guy, Cal, however you say his name, he opened up minus 300, but that wasn't really. That was a line that the bookies threw out to some sharp bettor. And so they test the waters with somebody they really trust. And so he took the plus money, and the line opened up like minus 135, Cal. And it got steamed up to like minus 250. So everybody bet Cal, but the initial money was on the other guy, and Petrosian. So... No, and I had Cal by decision, but I didn't have a bet on it. But that was my lean. That was my prediction that I posted. But I don't bet every fight that I have an opinion on. I'm starting to back away. I'm going with my strongest plays.
We're talking about Caio Borralho versus Armen Petrosian. Yeah, Caio Borralho defeated him via decision because he was better wrestler and because he had a better ground game. 29-28 Borralho, just as I predicted. I was thinking though that it's gonna be 29-28 for Petrosian, but I missed the winner. But the score was accurate.
No, it was kind of a dull fight, but he did what he needed to do to win. You know, I mean, you know, I guess he has good fight IQ. He doesn't have good personal IQ with that neck tattoo, but, you know, I usually try to fade people with face tattoos and bad haircuts. So.
Hey, I wanted to ask you that when you're already mentioned, what do you think in the USA of people with face tattoos, with those haircuts, weird haircuts? I mean, here it would be at least, how to say, non-orthodox. How is it?
I think they're bananas. And I think they're nuts.
So same like here. There is not much difference.
Yeah, why do you want to put graffiti on your body?
I don't have tattoos. I don't know.
I mean, you know what graffiti is. You know, when people spray paint walls, and that's what they're doing, and it's not attractive at all. You know, it's a detractor. I mean. Think about it. If I'm a guy and I put a neck tattoo on, I've just eliminated about 99% of the women on the planet if I'm looking for a partner. I have to find another tattoo freak to hang with, you know. But if I don't have the tattoo, at least I open up the possibility of, you know, other women, you know, the non-tattooed woman, you know. So I don't know. I think it's a poor life choice. Let's put it that way.
I know I don't have tattoos, so I really got no idea. Never even thought about having tattoos, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
No, I mean, when I was growing up, it was the guy who was the rebel, the antisocial guy who had a tattoo on his arm, and he might have "Love Mom" with a blade through it, and or guys coming back from the war with a tattoo to memorialize what they went through in battle or something. But that was about it when I was growing up. But now it's like more than half the people, it seems like, have tattoos in the United States.
yeah, nowadays it's pretty much normal to have a tattoo, but back in the old days, there were not many people with tattooed arms, legs, etc. Now it's popular.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
no,
it's not my thing. I'll take a pass on that. So,
not my thing either. Got to say, not my thing. Like I respect guys with tattoos, but why would I put it if I
my
don't
fo-
want it?
my focus is really narrow. I'm either
Oh,
rocking and rolling with my fireman, my Paul Gilbert fireman, and I'm either playing that or I'm doing research. That's all I do. I'm on the computer all the time doing research, analyzing lines, studying data, and then in between, I'm rocking and rolling in my headphones.
that's excellent. So, how are guitar classes doing? You said you learned everything on your own. How hard that was, man? I can't even imagine how hard that was.
Um, well, if you're determined, and I had a goal. I mean, I started I started in March of 2014. I My marriage effectively ended February of 2014, and I had to decide uh, what I was going to do with my life because um, that month my doctor wrote a letter saying I was fully disabled. So all the injuries, all the sports injuries, all the training caught up with me, and my tendons started snapping. Started with my stomach, busted gut in '97, and then it went on to problems with my feet, and then I've had hip surgery, back surgery, two rotator cuff surgeries, laparoscopic surgery, 9 surgeries total. So it takes a toll on your body, and so I couldn't do much. And so I said, I'm either going to write a book, because I had a friend, Samuel Blumenfeld was a famous Shakespearean scholar. We were buddies. We used to hang out together. And he was always encouraged me to write a book because he thought my perspective on psychology was unique. He had never heard it. And coming from a guy like that, a world-class scholar, I was impressed with that feedback. And I wrote a few chapters. And maybe I'll get around to completing it someday, but he wanted to hear my life story, because he was intrigued by it. He was just amazed some of the things. So I said, Dad, I decided to pick up the guitar instead of writing a book, and I made a goal of 10,000 hours in 5 years because there's a statistic out there that says that if you practice something 10,000 hours, you'll become an expert. And so, that's 2,000 hours a year for 5 years. And it took me a little longer because I had some issues that were coming up. It took me 6 years to get to 10,000 hours. But by the time, after several thousand hours, I went for lessons because I was trying to figure out this very complex lead by Vinnie Moore. And I went to the best guitarist that I knew, best teacher in the South Shore. And he was a Berkeley School of Music is one of the best schools of music in the world. It's in Boston. And he was a graduate from there. And I couldn't read music. And he's all about theory and reading music and teaching people how to read stuff. And I said, I don't do that. So we got our amps, we started jamming, and I started playing the song. And he stopped me, and he wanted to listen. He says, I've never heard anything like this. He says, this is so complex. He says, it'll take me 3 months just to learn this song, me practicing it. So he gave me, he says, let's try something else. He said, do you like Van Halen? I says, yeah, I'm all about Eddie Van Halen. And so he knew Van Halen, so he gave me a homework assignment, and the homework assignment was to play an album, and be prepared to play any song that he said. So a week goes by, and I come back, and he made a few tweaks, and then the next lesson he goes, you sound like Eddie, after the third lesson. Then the fourth lesson, I played a Bach-inspired piece on electric guitar, and it's 7 minutes long, and I got through about 5 minutes, and I started slowing down, and he was just blown away. He says, Dan, he says, you're the most amazing guitarist I've ever met. He says, you have the best musical ear of any guitarist I met. He says, and he was just blown away. He says, you don't need lessons. You need people to play with. So, but I always believe that I can learn from somebody. So I reject that. I'd take lessons from somebody that I considered better than me. Yeah. It's a small group, but just kidding. The last person I played was a world-renowned she played on all seven continents. She was playing Christmas performances in Vienna. She's that good. And so we were jamming. We were gonna play. I was all about the music. And then January 20, we started planning some gigs, and we were gonna do an album together and record. And then 2 months later, the pandemic started, and everything shut down. And so my goals I was going to, play live for the first time. That didn't happen, and it hasn't happened yet. So I just keep on playing. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some recording on my own, just record some stuff, and then find somebody who's good at editing videos and do that and upload it on a YouTube channel. But that's the goal. And then, of course, throwing some MMA picks on the channel as well.
Well, that could be awesome. You have some skills. We don't know each other for a very long period of time, but I've noticed that you have skills. I instantly know, like when you see a person. I know when somebody writes in the chat, I know whether he knows or doesn't know. It's very easy to recognize. The first time you wrote in the chat, I knew you were the guy who knows MMA.
Well, Vlad, there's two philosophies in life, two basic philosophies. And one is the golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated, treat people with dignity and respect because I want to be treated that way. Or it's a dog-eat-dog world, and if it's a dog-eat-dog world, I'm going to get you before you get me. So that's a very competitive, cutthroat kind of world. And although, I was telling some guy, I responded to one of his posts and I says, look, because he was complaining about all the assholes basically out there in the community. And there are a lot of them. They're very competitive. They're cutthroat. They put other people down. I won't do that. Even if if I don't consider somebody that great of a handicapper, but I listen to them, I won't put them down. I'm grateful that they're putting out free content. And sometimes they say things that make sense to me and I, utilize that. So it's kind of like my idea with a book. If I can get one idea from a book, then it's worth reading the book, If I get one idea from a capper that I hadn't thought of previously, then it's worth listening to them. So I don't put anybody down. And so I respond to this guy. I says, look, we're not the enemy. The cappers aren't the enemy. The bookie's the enemy. We're trying to beat the bookie, not each other. And I says, iron sharpens iron, and so I'm connecting with some good guys on there. I think I told you a couple of them that I really like. And they're really good. And I've been following them and they're winners. And so I'm going to follow a winner and I'm going to follow a winner and somebody who's really cool, and hope to strike up a conversation and a friendship, even though it's only online. It might turn into something later, but so that's where I'm at. So it's the golden rule. It's dog eat dog when I'm dealing with a bookie, but after that, it's the golden rule. You switch horses, and I want to be. I don't want to be known as an asshole in the community. I want to be known as a good guy.
Me too.
I give out my picks for free on Twitter. So, and they're for free on Tapology too. So, I got nothing to hide. And if you learn from something that I have to say, then great. If you want to follow me, great. If you don't, that's fine. I couldn't care less. I mean, yeah, I want people to follow me, but don't make life and death decisions based on an opinion I have on a fight. It's a grind, and we win some, and we lose. Hopefully, we'll win more than we lose. And if we do, then we're in the game. If we don't, then we drop out. And there's one guy complaining. He's a pretty well-known guy who handicaps fights, and he says, there's a lot of guys out there that reinvent themselves all the time. They'll be touts, and then they'll go broke, and they'll delete their accounts, and then they'll come up with a new name. I'm not that guy. You know.
Me neither. I have no problems with like making additional accounts, etc. Why would I do that? I mean, does it make sense? Like, oh, I made a new account, I'm gonna troll that guy. What are you gonna get with that, man? It's kind of disrespectful. I mean, if you wanna troll somebody, just what are you getting with that? You get nothing with
Well,
that.
it's part of that dog eat dog mentality, cutthroat. They're scammers. They're not honest. I'm hoping to get a little bit more sophisticated in my tracking because there's another site out there that I joined. I haven't posted my picks on there yet. It's called MMA Bets, I think, but they track all bets and they have nice stats, and so I'm gearing up for that. Right now, I'm so busy, with what I'm doing. I don't have a lot of time to open up additional accounts and try to figure things out. So, it's enough for me just to figure out who I want to bet and following that, and then doing the research, and then playing guitar as much as I can. So I'm consumed basically. So I wouldn't mind hiring a little helper.
That would be cool.
I,
Honestly,
I
I'm very glad because you found something that makes you happy, like guitar or some hobby. You said it is pretty much narrow. Well, for you, I wouldn't call it narrow. I would call it something that makes you happy. You're playing that guitar and you're playing it well, man.
well, here's the deal. I mean, we have there's three parts of the person in terms of time. You've got your past, you've got your present, and you've got your future. And I don't want to focus on my past. Yeah, the past is important to some extent, but if you're living in the past, and if you're dragging along like a ball and chain, and it interrupts your present life, then it's a problem, and it has to be dealt with. The successful people in life are people who are future oriented, and they're positive and they're goal oriented. I call it teleological. Teleos is purpose, the study of purpose, to have a purpose in mind. There's a great psychiatrist, Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he wrote it while he was in a Nazi internment camp during, the war. He was a Jew. He was a Jewish doctor. He was, the conditions were just inhuman. And they were starving. I mean, if you saw some of the pictures back then, all you saw was skeleton with skin basically on it. No meat to the bone, people starving to death. And he described that they would throw in like, a loaf of bread and all the prisoners would scramble to try to get a piece of the bread and some of the crumbs. And so you're eating whatever scraps of bread you can get in the morning and bugs to survive. And Frankel survived. And he said the reason that he survived, he said there were two types of people in that camp. The people that survived had a purpose. And for Frankel, he says, he was working on a project when he got arrested. And he says, I can't die yet because I haven't finished my project. And so holding on to that hope, that future hope that he was going to be able to finish his project, kept him alive in the present. That future orientation, that hope for something positive in the future kept him alive. People who didn't have that hope died in the prison camps. And so, the mind is very powerful. And in matters of extreme adversity, it could be a matter of life and death. And that's what he proved. And so I try to live in the present with a focus on the future and building my brand and getting better and getting to be a sharper handicapper and be a proven winner in the sport. That's what that my goal is, and get, of course, get some followers and make some more money. And I'm sure that's the same with you.
Yeah,
You have the same.
absolutely. My goal in the first place is to get more and more followers. I want people to recognize my passion, but people are recognizing it. Of course, I put Bulgarian cap and Bulgarian hat because I wanted to be recognized by something,
Right.
because from
Yeah.
my state, there is only Blago Ivanov, only Blago Ivanov in the UFC. But now people meet me in the street, they say they know who I am, and there are majority people who don't know who Blago Ivanov is and know who the Bulgarian cowboy is. So this is a
Right.
satisfaction.
No, and I just happened to notice you on YouTube because I click the icon for combat sports and find out who I want to listen to. And I saw you one day, and I saw that you have very brief breakdowns, but you do a lot of them. And there were some fights that I was interested in, and I wanted to hear your opinion. And I thought you had a solid read on things. And so and then we went back and forth and reached out, and now we're talking. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can speak for 10 minutes, but what am I going to say? Am I going to say, oh, Antonina Shevchenko has an aerial chuggy, she is switching to Dvid chuggy, now she is moving laterally to 45. I mean, many people don't understand that. Like this, I say, she has excellent kicks, but she doesn't have good counters. That's something everybody gonna understand. I can talk like, I'm an MMA fighter, I train MMA, man. I can talk like,
Right.
I can say Vizer, seatbelt, etc. 95% of people not gonna understand that. What am I gonna get? They're going to say, Vlad, what are you talking about? Well, am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to, to make it normal to jump up, to general population. Not everybody is a fighter here, and I mean respect to everybody, but if I listen to something, I want to understand that. That's why I'm doing brief breakdowns.
And the guys that I respect and follow and the guys that are cool are also guys involved in MMA. They're involved. They're mostly jujitsu guys, but like Liam's a jujitsu guy, and Dan Levy is a jujitsu guy, and so but they have a passion for the fights, and there's some guys out there that I really like that they train and they also study, and so they have different angles than I might have, so but.
Well, I'm a
Well,
taekwondo black belt, a kickboxer. I trained BJJ. Now I'm learning to wrestle. Now I'm learning cage wrestling. So now I'm MMA. So if there is something, there is passion number one in my life. That's MMA. I think you've noticed that right off the bat, right?
yeah. Hey, let's get into a few of these fights. Kind of want to hear what you have to say. I've I did some cursory analysis. Took a few notes on some of the fights that are coming up. Like I'll tell you my plays, and then you can tell me whether you like them or not.
Yeah, go for it,
The
please.
first at the top of the card, I like Brian Ortega. I laid the minus 160 on him. And there's limits on what we can bet online, so I did a max bet on that. And so I just think he has more ways to win. He could win by submission. He could win by KO. He could win by decision. Yair, maybe he could win by decision. But if it goes to the ground, he's in trouble, I think. And he went down to the ground with Max Holloway a couple times, and if that happens with Ortega, it's going to be a different world for him. And so I like Ortega, so I have him. The next one was probably something you might disagree with, but that's okay. But it was just an impression I had on a dog, and a lot of people wouldn't put their money on this guy, but it's Dustin Stoltzfus versus Dwight Grant. I took plus 135 on Stoltzfus. Now I'll tell you, he's lost 3 in a row. It's win or go home for him. But this is the angle this is where statistics come in. Dwight Grant is a low volume stand-up fighter. He's 37 years old. So he's 7 years older than Stoltzfus. you look at the statistics, when you have a gap of more than 5 years, when somebody is over 35 years old and he's fighting a younger fighter, they lose 70% of the time. Or I think it's more than 70% of the time now. So that's huge. That's like minus 220, you know, and I'm getting plus 135 with a guy who fought a murderer's row. I mean, all he fought were high caliber grapplers, you know. He fought, what was it? He fought, I don't have my notes here in front of me in terms of who he fought. But if you look at his record, the 3 losses were to, you could say, yeah, well, I understand how he could lose those. This is a fight he can win. And if he can institute his grappling and make it greasy and get him up against the cage and grind him out for a couple rounds, he can win a greasy 29-28 decision. So that was my lean on that fight. The other dog that I placed a bet was on Dao Zhang against Dustin Jacoby. And he hasn't lost since 2015. He's on a 15 fight streak where he hasn't lost. He had a controversial draw with Sam Alvey, I recall, and I think he won that fight, but he got a draw out of it. But and then the way he and Chukwe, the way he finished him in the first round with elbows. Yeah, I think he's live. And if he can push it, you know, it's a grappler striker matchup again. And if he can, you know, there's 6 years difference, you know, 34 and 28, the younger up and coming guy who's on a hot streak, you know, hasn't lost since 2015. I like taking plus money. I'll take a shot on that. That's, you know, so those are my initial reads on the card right now. I mean, I have some leans, you know, I think Miesha Tate will probably win a decision, but I wouldn't bet it. Soriano is way too juiced, minus 280. He probably wins, but, you know, his last couple fights, you know.
I rather like to play no distance on Soriano. I always fade betting on Soriano. I would rather go Soriano, not going distance. I don't know. I'm fading that guy to pick a side. I have my own reasons why. So unpredictable.
Ricky Simon, Jack Shore. I favor Shore by decision. You know, and some of these, I'm, you know, depending how things go, I might play some props. You know, I haven't made any decision. I'm going to wait, you know, until they come out. But lately, the prop lines haven't been very good. I mean, the bookies are starting to get wise, and they're juicing the props where it's not really worth your time playing them. You know, so with Jiang Li versus Muslim Sakayev, I favor. I got him Sakayev by decision. The only problem is that his 2 losses are by sub, and Zhilang has 4 wins by sub. So he does have a sub. You know, you might, if you had Sakayev, you might sprinkle the sub props on Jing Liang, you know, just to cover yourself. So that's his only route to victory, I think. I don't think he's going to knock him out.
I do agree with Salikov winning the fight, but the only problem with Salikov that I see if the fight gets dragged to the ground. But I do hope Salikov's takedown defense is going to injure. So I would also go with Salikov. So thumbs up.
Yeah. Amanda Lemos and Michelle Watterson. I mean, Lemos opened like minus 460. It's unbettable. She probably wins. She probably wins against Watterson. Watterson is
too small. She's 115.
She's a blown up atomweight, and so I just don't see it happening. You know,
unless judges rob Amanda Lemos, and don't forget.
I wouldn't play it. I just don't. I'm not gonna. I've kind of staying away from women's MMA. It's kind of my kryptonite. So I just rather watch. You know. I'm like I said, I've become a little bit more finessed and disciplined with my MMA betting and just betting my strong leans, you know, because, you know, I got an opinion on every fight. I could be all over the card, you know, but I don't think that's good for my return on investment. So I've kind of changed my style lately. We got Billy Aljo and Herbert Burns. Burns is kind of like one round and bust. You know, if he doesn't get the submission, then he gasses. And so,
Don't forget Nate Landwehr KO.
yeah. But Algio open 120 is now minus 165. So I have no betting interest in that fight.
Agreed.
Philip Rowe and Nurmagomedov.
Abubakar Nurmagomedov.
I think I'd lean towards Rowe, but I don't have a strong opinion on that. Jessica Penn and Emily Ducati, probably Ducati by decision, but it's 39-year-old Penny. I can't. How do you put your money on a 39-year-old woman fighter? You know, who's basically an atom weight that's fighting at 115.
I paid in that fight too.
Yeah, so I don't really have any interest. Daja Young is the only one, and Stofus on the early card that I have action on, and then the main event. That's it. We got Matt Schnell against Sue. Yeah, probably. Matt Schnell has 8 wins by sub, and 4 of some majority losses are by sub. So if Matt Schnell doesn't get the sub in the first round, then he probably loses. He probably gets KO'd. So, but I have no action. I have no action on that. And so I think that covers, Shane Burgos and Charles Jordan. Now here's one where I would consider.
I'm paying that fight, man. Too hard to bet.
It is. It's almost worth a sprinkle. Burgos has taken a lot of damage, and although he's probably the better overall guy, and he's got the 6-inch reach advantage. He's fought the better competition, but 2 of the 3 losses by KO, and 8 of Jourdain's wins, 8 of his 13 wins are by KO. So, a guy who knocks out people against a chinny guy who I don't know where he's at right now. So that's about it. That's the card in a nutshell. Those are my leans, some ideas. I know you disagree on one of them. That's okay.
I disagree.
Yeah, and that's okay. And I'm not. I've got all the action I want on it, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, good luck to that. Absolutely.
Well, there's always live betting, and that's the other thing about live betting is that one of my concerns about live betting is that there's seems to be at least a 15-second delay. That the bookies have they have the live feed, and then the feed that I'm getting is maybe 15 seconds delayed. So and I noticed that on some of the propositions, you're like, I don't know if you ever look at live betting on the fights, like some guys are worth a shot. Like say if you like, for instance, Burgos and Jourdain. Say if you had a bet on Burgos and you laid the juice, and after one round, it's pretty competitive, and Jourdain has a chance. You might take pretty good plus money. Maybe Burgos wins round 1, a close round 1, so you're getting plus 200 or Jourdain live. That might be worth a poke. So you're getting better odds sometimes if you wait. I've had the opportunity in baseball a couple times already where I could have played, and I should have played middles. I should have bet both sides and guaranteed myself a win. So, like for instance, the Yankees were up by 3 runs, and you could have got plus 500 with the Red Sox, and the Yankees were like minus 126 to open, and then in the 5th inning they're minus 800. So if you took plus 500, a small sprinkle on the Red Sox, you could cover your Yankees bet. And if the Yankees lose, then you break even. And if the Yankees win, then you win minus the sprinkle. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely makes sense, 100%.
Yeah. So I look at those lines too, and sometimes I play around with those. So.
Yeah, makes sense. I've never did live betting. I always go to the bookie before the fight, and I don't wanna have that kind of a temptation, because if I have a ticket, if I have a piece of paper, That's okay. I don't bet live. I don't bet, on PC because I don't want to have that kind of a temptation. I mean, that's just my
Well,
personal opinion.
the thing is I don't have any tickets. I mean, I have virtual tickets because everything's online. I have a few offshore accounts, and that's about it. You know,
That's
uh,
okay, but in my state, you can still go to bookie and take a ticket. So
yeah, I've got my Packers football hat on, champs 2010. Yeah, and I've got my Aaron Rodgers hat, Green Bay Packers. So it's not my fault. I was born near Green Bay, so I was raised a skinhead. So here's the gray hair. All the losing bets. That's what's done to my hair. So
no
probably some of
worries,
the
man.
probably sweating some of the winners too. So
You're still dangerous then.
hey, well,
Yeah.
and until they shovel dirt on my casket, yeah. So anyhow, it's we've been at it for a little bit over an hour, and I got to go. But it was good hooking up with you, and good luck this weekend. And we'll chat again off site, and I have some other impressions on some other things that we talked about. So.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. I also have to go nap time, and tomorrow I have a lot of work. I'm also doing some coaching tomorrow, so a rocky day. But thank you so much, and I'm always glad to hear other people's stories. And thank you so much. Glad to get in contact with you, man.
All right, my man.
All right.
Peace.
All right. Peace to you too.